Hello everyone, Lauren Jackson, welcome back. Thank you for joining me again for week 3 of my Speech Talks series. This week's Speech Talk, I wanted to build a little bit on what we talked about last week. So if you tuned in last week, you will remember that we talked about something called the language development staircase. So I'm going to do a very quick little review for those of you who are new to our speech talks or who have maybe forgotten. We talked about language development in terms of a staircase. And at the bottom of our staircase is the foundational skill, the most important skill for communication, which is relation and engagement. Regulation and engagement, excuse me. Relations are important too. Regulation and engagement. So you want your body to be calm and at stasis to be able to communicate. And you also need to be engaged with another person. If you're just speaking to a child who is not focused on you, that's not communication because that child is not receiving those words and those thoughts. Okay, so we want engagement and regulation. That's very important so that our children can move up to the next step, which is our most basic communication, getting our wants and needs met with our words, and then moving all the way up there to our higher level language. So using our language to solve problems, to make inferences, to make judgments about the world around us. So we have regulation and engagement up here to language, and up here to higher level thinking. So what I also shared last week was that a lot of times our kids on the spectrum, right, if we recall, tend to get a little stuck. A lot of them here, right in the middle, right at that basic language level, that rote language land, I called it, because we have lots and lots of holes in our relation and I keep saying it, our engagement and regulation here at the bottom. So there are lots of holes there especially for our kids on the spectrum. Their bodies are all out of whack. Sensory stimulation is just completely out of sync with what's going on around them. So that can make it really difficult for the kids to safely navigate up that staircase. So one way that we can help them do that, if you recall my saying, was by encouraging them to hold on to the banister. And the banister in this scenario is the child's intrinsic motivation to communicate. So that's what we're going to talk about today, a little bit about the banister and what we can do as adults and caregivers and parents to make that banister more sturdy and stable and help them navigate up that staircase. So I want you to think about a scenario, okay? I want you to think about your son or your daughter walking in. You're walking into the room and you see them playing and you want to engage them on what they're playing. So you walk in and you just stand up here and you say, "Oh, hey, Johnny, what are you playing? Is that Cars? I love Cars. That looks like so much fun. Which one is your favorite car?" "My favorite car is the white car." So lots of adult words, and we're doing a good job of asking them questions, but we're not really giving them a whole lot of chances to respond to us. So they're hearing a lot of language coming at them, and they're not getting a whole lot of time to initiate their own thoughts with us, nor are we giving them a lot of opportunities to respond. So we as adults do what I like to say and call, we over-prompt. We over-prompt our students all the time. And I do this too. It is hard. Silence is difficult, right? It is difficult to walk up to a child, ask them a question, and not get a response. You want to quickly jump in there and give them the words that they need so that they can respond to you, because the silence is not golden. I don't like silence. Ask anyone on the IEP team at Millersville. If there is silence, I'm gonna crack a joke or ask a question. I don't like to sit in silence. I like there to always be noise. I am the type of lady, the TV's on, whether I'm watching it or not. I just like noise. I don't like silence. So I think a lot of adults are like me, in particular with children, we don't like their silence. We want to hear them talk or communicate. So we have to sort of retrain our brain to get away from thinking of our children as just responders to our words. We really want them to be initiators, not just responders. I also want you to think about this. Questions. So for lots of kids, particularly kids on the spectrum, answering a lot of questions is just not fun. It's not super fun. It's not very motivating. That level of communication for kids, particularly kids on the spectrum, is take it or leave it. They're generally not getting their needs met by answering our questions. So that's just not going to be the most motivating activity for them, okay? And it can be a little limiting also, if you think about it. So, Johnny, do you want chicken nuggets for lunch? Yes or no? Yes. Maybe we'll get a yes out of that. And that's kind of a one-word answer. We're not learning to build our language and adding verbs and nouns and adjectives and lots of things. Giving choices is fantastic if that's where your child is. But we should also give them the opportunity to give us more and to build their sentence length more. So, how do we do this, you ask? Well, there is something that we do called, and it's got a very self-explanatory name, communication temptations. So it's just like it sounds. We tempt the child to communicate. We tempt them to use the words. So I have some tips and some different ideas for you in the area of communication temptations, and I'm going to break it up into 2 different videos. So we're going to talk about 2 of them today, and we'll talk about 3 of them next week. So communication temptation, the tip number 1 that I have for you is one that is extremely difficult for us as parents to do and for children to do as well. And that is wait. So wait for them to communicate. The power of the pause, I like to say. It is very hard for us in our busy adult lives. That's supposed to be a pause button. Hopefully you can see that. It's very hard for us in our adult lives to just stop and pause. That's why when I made my initial video, I shared with you that there is something about this quarantine, this time at home, that while stressful, difficult, there's also a beautiful gift in it, and that is the gift of time. We have a little bit more time. Our lives have slowed down a little bit, and we can take a little bit more time to wait. So a lot of times our students on the spectrum need that extra processing time before they respond. They have to get their body regulated and into that stasis place, which some children can do on their own, some might need help, but they're going to take a while to process what you say. So the waiting can sometimes help in the processing and help them figure out how they want to respond and what they want to respond with, but also the waiting can give you the opportunity to create lots of different options. So think about some things that you do typically in your day that you could build some communication into. We have this tendency as parents, especially, we know what our kids want, right? 90% of the time, we probably know what our kids want. We know when they go in the kitchen that they're heading for the snack basket, or we know when they are heading for the front door that they want to go outside and play. And it's very easy for us to just go, do it for them, get them what they want, give it to them so that we can move on with what we want to do. That's super easy, and that's super tempting. As a busy single mom, I feel you and I get you. But if we think about building in some pausing and some wait time, there is lots of language that could come out of that. So I'm going to give you a few examples of some ways that I wait with the children at school. So I always obviously shut the classroom door. The classroom door is shut going out and going in. So one way that I stop is we get to the door and I just stand there. Now, can they open the door themselves? Oh, of course they can, but I don't let them because I stand in front of the doorknob and I just wait. I wait. And if they don't say anything, if they don't say what I'm looking for them to say, I'll say, what do we need to do? And generally speaking, for many of our children, if I stand and I wait, that will prompt the open. So then I'll say, open the door, let's go. So I'm building on what they said and adding a few more words. So that's just one example of a way that you can wait. You can, at dinner time, bring the plate empty, put it in front of your child, and just wait. Don't put the food on it right away and see if it prompts them to ask for food. They might say, chicken. So you'll say, oh yes, chicken nuggets. So you're building on their language that they've said, and you're giving them the food. So think about some other ways in your life that you could build in the pause. You could press pause and build in those opportunities for those children to communicate. It's everywhere all the time. Give them the remote to the television, but take the batteries out. They're going to have to ask you for help, right? Give them one of their favorite toys, but maybe don't give them the whole thing. They're going to have to ask you for more, and you wait for them to do that. And if they don't, then you prompt them by asking a general question like, it's missing, what should we do? And wait and see if they respond to that. If they don't respond to that general question, you can then draw on their past experiences. Like, you've played with this before and you needed something. What did you need? So that might trigger in them a memory. Oh, wait, I need the key. Or, the remote stopped working a few months ago and we had to put something in it. What did we put in it? And that would make them think batteries. Okay, so these are just some examples and some ways that you can build in the wait and also build on their language. Now, you may have caught me within that sort of description talking about expanding on their language. So a lot of our students do tend to respond with one-word answers or short answers. So when we model back to them, I like to always encourage my families to add on a word or two. Now, I don't mean going from the child saying chicken to saying, oh yes, you want the chicken nuggets with the breading. That's a lot of extra words. But if the child says to you chicken, you can say chicken nuggets, right? Adding a word to help the description, to build on to their overall utterance length. Hopefully, as time goes on, they'll start to be more ready to imitate more of those words. So that's just an example of how to use the power of waiting and the power of expanding and returning on their language. So that's one example of a communication temptation. I did want to touch for a minute on kids who may not be using words at all. So I just want you to remember that communication is not just words, okay? Communication is eye contact. Communication is gestures. Communications can be vocalizations like grunts or squeals. All of those things are communication. If your child is a child that is not at the stage of using words to communicate, your job as an adult is to accept whatever communication they're giving you and model some correct words for them or signs for them or buttons on their iPads for them. So if you put in front of them, let's say you put in front of them a juice and they can't open it, right? And you just are sitting there and you're waiting for them to say juice and they're not saying it and they're getting more and more frustrated and they shove it to you and they grunt. That's communication, right? That is communication. Accept that so that we don't get escalated to the point where they are so dysregulated that they cannot engage with you any further. Accept the grunt and model for them. Say juice and give it back. Modeling one word at a time for those students is really important because they're not going to be communicating back to you in full sentences. So let's not model full sentences for them, okay? So that is an example of how you might use the wait concept with a child who doesn't have words. Make sure you're acknowledging the communication and not letting it get to a point where they're so dysregulated and so frustrated that the whole session, the whole time is a wash. We don't want that. We want communication to be as positive as possible. So accept the communication they're giving you and model for them just a step slightly above, okay? So that is my tip about waiting. I said I was gonna do 2, but that is a lot of talking, so I think I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna save the other ones for another time. So remember, we're trying to build the stability as we go up our language staircase by filling in these holes of relation and engagement and regulation and engagement, but also we're trying to get them to grab onto that banister, their intrinsic motivation. And one way that we can do that is through communication temptations, tempting them to join us in our world of language and communication by doing that in whatever way they're comfortable right now, and then giving them the wait time to process and to come up with a response, and then modeling back to them at a level slightly higher than what they gave us. So we're gonna give them some more of those words to hopefully learn and process and use eventually as they're ready, okay? So next week, we're going to talk about some of the other ways that we can do communication temptations. I hope this was helpful. Please, as always, if you have questions, reach out to me, lrjackson@aacps.org. I would love to help and answer any of these questions. And thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you all again next week. Stay well. Mwah.